There is a particular kind of prison that has no bars. Its walls are made of someone else's low expectations. Its lock is the belief they've sold you about your own limitations. For 28 years, my husband, Gregory, was not just my spouse. He was my warden. And his favorite tool was pity. He didn't shout. He pitted. He pitted my quaint hobbies. He pitted my simple friends. He pitted my lack of worldly ambition. He spoke to me as if I were a delicate, slightly embarrassing heirloom, something to be kept on a shelf, dusted occasionally, but never truly used. He was convinced I was trapped. By his money, by my age, by my own imagined fragility. He believed the cage was so comfortable I'd never notice I couldn't fly. And for a long, long time, I believed him. I folded my dreams into smaller and smaller shapes, trying to fit them into the tiny box he'd allotted for my life. I became an expert in making myself invisible. But a quiet rage, when tended in secret, can become a powerful fuel. The day I left, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a fortune. I just had a suitcase and a self I had almost forgotten. It was the scariest and most honest thing I had ever done. He expected me to falter, to fail, to come crawling back, chastened and grateful for the shelter of his disdain. Instead, I learned to build my own shelter. And then I built a home. And then I built a life, a vibrant, expansive, glorious life that had my name on the deed. Years later, when he saw me from across a room, I was no longer the woman he remembered. I was the woman I had always been, finally in focus. And his punishment wasn't my anger, or my success, or even my indifference. It was the dawning, devastating realization that the greatest loss of his life was the one he had engineered himself. I met Gregory when I was 24, an art student with paint under my nails and big, messy dreams. He was 30, a rising star in commercial real estate. He found me refreshing. I found him solid. He was an anchor in what felt like a chaotic sea. Early on, the dynamic was set. My art was a charming phase. My friends were bohemian. My thoughts were unformed. He wasn't cruel. He was helping. Helping me dress for success, his definition. Helping me network with the right people, his colleagues' wives. Helping me see the realities of the art world, i.e., that I wasn't good enough. We married. I put down my brushes. It's not a real career, Simone, he'd say gently. Let's focus on building a real life. Our life became a showpiece. A flawless Georgian house. Impeccable dinner parties. My role was curator of the aesthetic. Choosing the right curtains, arranging the perfect flowers, being a silent, smiling accessory on his arms. My world shrank to the dimensions of our home. I became a ghost in my own life. Gregory's language was the language of benevolent ownership. We don't really like abstract art, do we, darling? I loved it. We think a quieter color would be better for the living room. I yearned for fuchsias. We should avoid those people. They're not our kind. They were my kind. He managed all the money. I had an allowance for household expenses. I had no credit in my own name. No retirement account. My identity was a subsidiary of his. He'd pat my hand and say, "Don't you worry your pretty head about taxes, sweetheart. I've got it handled." The final erosion was of time itself. At our age, he'd say when I was barely 50, we should be thinking of comfort, not new ventures. He framed my every flicker of desire, for a class, a trip, a small business idea, as a symptom of a late-onset crisis. Something to be soothed and managed, not encouraged. I was not a partner. I was a patient. And he was the doctor, prescribing a life of quiet, comfortable decline. The crack didn't come from a fight. It came from a nothing. A Tuesday. Gregory was at a conference. The housekeeper had come and gone. The silence was absolute, and for the first time, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a vacuum. I wandered into the formal living room no one ever used, and saw my reflection in the massive, gilded mirror over the fireplace. I saw a woman in a beautiful cashmere sweater, perfectly coiffed hair, and eyes as empty as the room. A line from a poem I'd loved in college surfaced unbidden. Do not go gentle into that good night. I had gone so gentle. I had gone silence. That afternoon, I did something reckless. I drove to a art supply store, a real one, not the boutique craft shop where I bought decorative ribbons. The smell of turpentine and fresh canvas hit me like a physical blow, a Proustian rush of my former self. My hands shook as I bought a small, cheap canvas, a set of acrylics, and 2 brushes. I hid them in the back of my gardening shed. That night, after dark, I took them out. I squeezed cadmium red directly onto the canvas. I didn't paint a picture. I made a mark. A furious, glorious, red slash. It was a scream in visual form. It was the most honest thing I'd done in 20 years. I hid the canvas. But I couldn't hide the change in me. That single act of rebellion was a tiny leak in the dam. A secret self began to trickle back into existence. I started reading again. Not the books on the curated shelf in the den, but novels about adventurous women. I listened to podcasts about women starting over. I secretly took an online course in graphic design, paying for it with cash I saved from the grocery budget. I was building a secret life in the basement of my sanctioned one. And with every secret, I grew stronger. Gregory's pronouncements began to sound not like wisdom, but like the distant, fading radio station of a world I was leaving. The catalyst was a comment about my mother. She passed, and at the small, family-only memorial I planned, Gregory sighed afterwards. Thank God that's over. All that sentimental clutter in the house. We can get it cleared out tomorrow. Sentimental clutter. Oh, my mother's teacups, her handwritten recipes, the Afghan she knitted. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't see a husband. I saw a man who wanted to streamline a human heart into something more efficient. I saw the rest of my life in that moment. A slow process of being cleared out, made tidy, erased. I didn't argue. I just knew. The planning took 6 months of meticulous, silent work. I opened a bank account with a $500 deposit from selling some jewelry he'd never liked. I used my fledgling graphic design skills to do tiny freelance jobs on Fiverr, funneling the pennies into that account. I contacted an old art school friend, now a divorce lawyer, for a clandestine consultation. She outlined the reality. I was entitled to half, but the fight would be brutal. He would use my financial dependence as a weapon. Do you want the fight, Simone? She asked. Or do you want your freedom? I said, without hesitation. Then walk away clean. Take what's legally yours in the settlement, but be prepared for him to make it hell. Or, consider just walking to the door with your dignity. It's harder, but sometimes cleaner. I chose the door. On the morning of my 54th birthday, I waited for Gregory to leave for his golf game. I packed a single suitcase with clothes that felt like me. Simple, comfortable, nothing he'd ever chosen. I took my mother's Afghan. I took the secret canvas. I left my wedding ring on his dress. On the kitchen island I left a note. It wasn't long. It didn't explain. It simply said, Gregory, I am leaving. I will be in touch through my lawyer, Marta Evans. Please do not contact me directly. I drove to a long-term stay hotel my friend had helped me book. I paid for the first week with my secret debit card. I sat on the bed in the silent, impersonal room, and I waited for the panic, for the regret. It never came. All I felt was a vast, terrifying, and exhilarating quiet. The quiet of my own thoughts, for the first time in decades. Music swells to a tense crescendo as she packs, then drops into a stark, breathless silence as she sits in the hotel room. The visuals are stark. The note on the granite, the empty space in the closet, the suitcase in the trunk of a car. The first year was a masterclass in humility and grit. The divorce was, as predicted, ugly. Gregory was less heartbroken than incredulous. His lawyer painted me as an unstable, menopausal woman abandoning stability for a fantasy. He offered a paltry settlement, hoping fear would drive me back. My lawyer, Marta, was a pit bull. He thinks you'll break. Don't break. We fought. We got a fair, if not lavish, settlement. It was enough for a small safety net, not a life of leisure. I used part of it to rent a 500-square-foot studio apartment. It had terrible carpet and glorious north light. I painted the walls white. It was my blank canvas. I got a job. Not a career, a job. I worked the morning shift at a chic bakery near my apartment. I learned to make perfect lattes and memorized regulars' orders. The physical work was grounding. The camaraderie with the other women, young, old, all figuring life out, was a bomb. No one pitied me. They just asked me to pass the flour. In the afternoons, I painted. I built a website. I called myself Simone Kerr Artist. Using my maiden name for the first time since I was 24. I entered local art fairs, hauling my own canvases in a rented van. I sold a piece here and there. Then a gallery owner, a woman with kind eyes and a sharp business sense, took 2 on consignment. They sold in a week. I reinvested every cent into better materials, into marketing, into a class on small business finances. I learned about profit margins and social media algorithms. I was terrible at it at first. Then I got better. I made friends, real friends. A ceramicist from the studio complex next door. A retired teacher who took my painting workshop. They didn't know Gregory. They knew me. Simone, who made fierce paintings and terrible puns and brought too much pastry to potlucks. For years after I left, I rented my first proper studio. 5 years in, I bought a small bright condo. No mortgage, paid in full from an art sale. Every object in it was chosen by me for me. It was a manifesto in wood and glass and light. The encounter happened at a charity gala for the arts. My gallery owner friend insisted I come. One of my pieces was in the silent auctions. I wore a simple black jumpsuit. I felt good. Strong. I was chatting with a group, the gallery owner, a museum curator, a couple who collected my work. I was laughing, fully engaged, not performing for anyone. I felt a stare. The kind that raises the hairs on your neck. I turned slightly. There he was. Gregory. 20 feet away, holding a drink frozen. He was with a much younger woman who looked bored. He looked older. Not in years, but in spirit. Diminished. The arrogant set of his shoulders was gone. He was just a man in a slightly too big tuxedo. Our eyes met. A jolt went through him. His mouth actually fell open. He was seeing a phantom. But I was no ghost. I was solid, radiantly alive, occupying a space he could no longer access. I saw the calculations flicker across his face. The shock, the disbelief, the dawning, awful recognition. This was not the broken, penitent woman he expected. This was a stranger of his own creation. A woman who had taken the pieces he thought were worthless and built a cathedral. I held his gaze for just a second. I did not smile. I did not nod. I offered no acknowledgement, no forgiveness, no bridge. I simply looked at him as one looks at a landscape through a window, noted, and then turned away. I turned back to my friends, leaned into the conversation, and laughed again. A real, unforced laugh. I left him there, in the echo of that laugh, to drown in the realization. His punishment was complete. It was the understanding that I was never trapped. I was dormant. And he had been the winter I needed to survive so I could bloom, fiercely and unforgettably without him. He tried to contact me, once. An email a week later. It was rambling, full of faux concern and veiled accusations. I saw you looked well. This artist life seems to suit you. I hope you're being careful. The art world can be fickle. It was a last, pathetic attempt to plant a seed of doubt, to reassert his role as the wise assessor of my life. I deleted it without replying. He was now a footnote in my story, and I no longer edited for footnote. My life now is not defined by his absence, but by my presence. I have a thriving career that fulfills me. I have a community that sustains me. I have a peace that anchors me. I travel alone to places that thrill me. I say no without apology. I say yes with abandon. Sometimes in my quiet studio, I think of that woman in the gilded mirror. I don't pity her. I thank her. She endured. She waited. And when the time was right, she was brave enough to walk into the terrifying, beautiful unknown, carrying nothing but the spark of who she was always meant to be. Gregory thought I'd never leave. He thought the cage was of his making. He was wrong. The cage was in my mind, and I held the key all along. All I had to do was believe I deserved to turn. If you are listening, and you feel the subtle walls of someone else's low expectations closing in, if you hear the language of limitation dressed up as love or protection, please heard. You are not too old. You are not too dependent. You are not too fragile. These are lies that cages are made. You might not have a plan. You might only have a suitcase and a terrifying hope. That is enough. Start with one thing. One secret class. One saved dollar. One conversation with a lawyer. One furious red slash on a canvas. That do not leave for revenge. Leave for tomorrow. Leave for the person you are becoming, who is waiting for you just on the other side of that do. And when you meet the past, as you inevitably will, you will not need words. Your life, your vibrant, messy, glorious, authentic life, will speak for you. It will say everything that needs to be said. And the silence of your former captor, as they watch you walk away in a light they can never dim, will be the sweetest victory. My husband thought I'd never leave. He didn't expect me to thrive without him. And my greatest triumph is that his opinion no longer matters to me. The most powerful escape is not from a place, but from the idea that you ever belong there. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.